Hello, my name is Osha. I like to discuss history. Today is March the 17th, 2026. We're several uh, days, roughly 18 days into the US Israeli war against Iran. Today, I saw something in the news. The director of the US Counterintelligence Center, a guy called Joseph Kent, resigned his position, criticizing the U.S. involvement or the war in Iran, saying that Iran did not pose an imminent threat. So basically, he is indicating that some kind of propaganda or misinformation, disinformation, that's intentional, false information occurred that's instigated the U.S. Israeli war against Iran. Now, this guy, well, he's an ex-military guy, so and was appointed by President Donald Trump. Right? He seems credible in terms of military matters because um, he spent a long time in the military, about 2 decades. He retired as a chief warrant officer. He served in the Iraq War, and he lost his late wife in 2019. She was also serving in the military as a cryptologist, and she was killed by a suicide bomber in Syria in the Middle East in 2019. So this guy seems very credible. He'd also worked for the CIA, and he was director as of today or yesterday, whenever he retired. I think he resigned today, and it's been all over the news when he resigned as director of the Center of Counterterrorism Center. He said Iran did not pose any imminent threat. So basically, that America struck Iran for no reason at all. Well, um, everybody's saying, well, that America did strike Iran on behalf of Israel to sort of establish Israeli hegemony in the Middle East. I've gotten interested and rather curious, about why this national animus or whatever between Israel and Iran. And so, as a historian who studied history, who studied the Bible extensively, I've studied the Bible from cover to cover several times, right? And apart from my faith, I'm a Christian, but I don't mix my my vocation or my as a historian or a lawyer. I have a law degree. This does not constitute legal advice because I'm not licensed to practice law. And the analysis I do, right? I don't mix the two. I'm able to analyze information, right? And I'm not carried away by I'm not carried away by any visceral inclinations, right? So I focus on data, facts, and my orientation is to analyze. I'm going to do a video explaining, something about why the founding fathers chose not to give the vote to all Americans, but they used the electoral college at the beginning of at our founding. Was the electoral college that chose our presidents, and these were supposed to be wise people, highly educated, highly skilled, to be able to analyze the qualities of who should be our president. Of course, Alexander Hamilton famously called the masses a great beast, and like John Adams and our founding fathers, they were very concerned that those who hadn't acquired enough education, weren't developed enough, the masses, the general population, could be easily swayed by the words of a demagogue, right? A demagogue who will just use, he can use false information just to manipulate them. And we know this has happened before. They knew from studying the Romans, right, how the masses were manipulated by a demagogue. In more recent times, it happened in Nazi Germany with Adolf Hitler and the rise of fascists who would just manipulate the masses. It happened in Italy under Mussolini. So this is what propaganda, manipulating the masses, this is a tool that has been used to incite people against a nation or to go to war. But right now, what I want to do is talk about, just straight to the title, how Persians, again, Persians are synonymous for Iranians, modern day Iranians. So Iran, Persia, they're synonymous. So I've done videos explaining in detail. So how Persians, how Iranians protected Jews in the past. Of course, from base point, we already know, I've talked extensively about Cyrus the Great, who is in the Bible, right? Cyrus the Great. This was about 550 BC, under the Achaemenid Empire, which he founded. The Achaemenid Empire, of course, he freed the Jewish people from the Babylonian captivity. So Jews had been captured under the Nebuchadnezzar, and they'd be transferred, removed from their lands, right, in Israel. They'd been removed, and they were now in Babylon. Babylon is the area of Mesopotamia. I think I'm going to do a video just discussing civilizations in the Middle East. These are great civilizations, and it can be confusing. And these civilizations come up in the Bible a lot, and they come up in history, right? So they were under the Babylonian captivity. And when Cyrus the Great was a Persian, right? So that's, again, Persia, modern day Iran, Persians and Iranians, they're synonymous. He decides to free the Jewish people, and he sends them back to their homelands, right? And in the Bible, Cyrus is the only non-Hebrew person that's referred to as a Messiah or an anointed one, right? So he frees them. So that was the ancient protection, right? I've done a video discussing that. But later on, during the rise of Roman Christianity, right, after Christianity became the state religion of the Romans, initially the Romans had also persecuted the early Christians. We know in the Bible, virtually all the apostles, except John, had been killed, by the Romans, right? They'd been killed, and they had been crucified. They died very grotesque, horrifying deaths, right? And we know in the book of Acts how Apostle Paul, when they were, his fellow Jewish people, because Apostle Paul was Jewish, when there was an attempt to kill him, to seize him, even though he was an innocent man, he had two objectives. He was exercising his right as a Roman citizen. He was Jewish, but he was a Roman citizen, right? So he appealed to Caesar. That was his right, to appeal to Caesar, right? Caesar was the emperor, so they were going to transport him to Rome, right? And of course, he wrote his letters to the Romans, his epistles. And the other thing, of course, is he had an objective, a missionary objective, to plant churches, to further disseminate the word, right? If he got into Rome, Rome had the most population at that time, over 1 million people. Romans, it was a huge city. I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to do a video explaining civilizations, the idea of, cities, urban cities. Urban cities are, and civilizations are intricately linked together, right? So it shows the progress, the advancement of mankind, right? Not just culturally. So we saw that Jewish people were persecuted, right, under Roman Christianity as well. So when The Romans adopted Christianity as a state religion after Constantine, right? Emperor Constantine. They continued to persecute Jewish people because you saw a dubious interpretation of Christianity, the Bible, because instead, of seeing Jewish people as people of the good book, just like Muslims saw later on. By the way, Muslims as well. In the Quran, Jews are actually given a special status, right? They're protected, right, in the Quran because they're called people of the book. So the Prophet Muhammad asked for the protection of Jewish people. So people shouldn't misrepresent religion as why Jewish people are, persecuted by maybe Christians or or Muslims, right? Because these two doctrines, right, actually give Jewish people special protection, special status, right? So when Christianity was founded by the Apostle Paul, because he's the one who elaborated on the doctrines of Christ, he said Jewish people were basically gave them a special status. They were protected as well, right? That the Savior Messiah came for them, and they're still the Old Testament, the Torah, the Hebrew, the Jewish Bible. That's what Christians use. We call it the Old Testament, right? And of course, in addition to the New Testament, right? What the disciples, the apostles, the followers of Christ, and Apostle Paul wrote. That's the New Testament, right? About Christ and his message. So during the Roman Empire, after the Romans accepted Christianity, made it their state religion, they continued to persecute Jewish people because they would instead misrepresent the Bible and call Jewish people those who killed Jesus. They misrepresented it, so they were persecuting Jewish people. But however, Persians protected Jewish people at this time in the Sassanian Empire. Right, the Sassanian Empire. I've done a video. I've talked about how the Sassanian Empire came. The Sassanian Empire is between 224 AD. AD means after the death. It also means they now use a new convention as well, CE, that's continuing era. So CE or AD, that's the same. So BC, before Christ, right? Before Christ was born. So you see they count down from BC, or they will say BCE, before the current era or common era, the current era, right? The current era. So CE is equivalent with AD, right? So in 224 AD, the Sassanian Empire arose. Again, that's Persia. The Persian Sassanian Empire arose. And with the rise of the Persian Sassanian Empire, they were the ones who established the first academies. I've talked about the first universities, right? The Persians established the first university, the first center of higher education, the first university. And so they all, in 271 AD, the Persian Sassanian Empire, so the Iranians established the first university, and they protected Jewish people at that time because Jewish people were facing persecution in the West, right? From including Judea, their homelands, because the Romans had actually conquered that area around AD 70, and it led to the dispersion of the Jews all over Europe and different places. So some Jews went to the other parts of the Middle East. Some people were in Persia, and so they were protected in the Persian Empire of the Sassanians from between 224 AD to 651 AD, when the Persian Empire was conquered by the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs, the caliphs, right, from the Arabian Peninsula, right, after Islam was founded, established under the Prophet Muhammad. So the Persian Empire protected the Jewish people in their academies, and something interesting happened, right? So Jewish people use the Torah, right, which we Christians use. The Torah is the Old Testament portion, right? But a lot of flourishing now started to occur, right, in these Persian academies that were in Babylon, because when the Persians, the Sassanians, when they established the empire and they were expanding, they conquered areas of Babylon, right? Babylon was part of Mesopotamia. So they had these academies they established, and Jewish people were protected and allowed to use these academies. And what was going on was they produced what's called the Babylonian Talmud. Babylonian Talmud. The Talmud is the scholarly interpretations, analysis by rabbis of the Bible, right? They interpret the Bible and devise how to apply the Bible, what the Bible, that's the Jewish, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, what it means. They interpret it, they analyze it, and they become part of Jewish custom and law. So they interpret it, they analyze it, so that's the Talmud. And so they are scholarly interpretations, analysis by Jewish rabbis, right? Jewish scholars. So the Babylonian Talmud was developed under the aegis of the Persians during the Sassanian Empire, right? In these Persian academies in Babylon. So that's where the Babylonian, and that's why it's called the Babylonian Talmud, because they were given special protection, right? They were given special protection, and they were allowed to to govern themselves. They had some kind of autonomy, right? Even within the Persian Empire, they're allowed to govern themselves by their laws. And at this time, the Persians had their own religion called Zoroastrianism. I've discussed Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is actually the first monotheistic religion, right? Monotheism is, that's the religion of saying there's just one God, one creator God, as opposed to, many cultures have multiplicity of gods. But the Zoroastrianism were the first people who said, well, there's one God, right? The first religion is said one God, and it's Persian. And they have that conflict between good and evil. And we see that the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all borrowed from this Zoroastrianism. Well, the Persians didn't force the Jews to convert to Zoroastrianism or not to practice their religions. They gave them special protection within the Persian Empire, the Persian Sassanian, the Sassanids, right? The Sassanian Empire, or the Sassanids. And they developed the Babylonian Talmud during this period. Another time that Jewish people were protected by Persians was during the era of the Nazis, so in more modern times, right? So again, so there was a time, the place where there were the most Jews in the world was within the Russian Empire, and in Poland, right? That was part of the Russian Empire. But the Russians, they would typically conduct what are called pogroms, right? Pogroms, those are like when hundreds of Jews, even up to 1,000, could be killed in their towns, right? So that's micro genocide. Genocide it's a lot, right? Genocide, there are a lot of people that, basically you're decimating the entire people, large populations. Like genocide was what happened during the Second World War under the Nazis, because there were 6 million Jews that were killed then, right? But pogroms happened regularly against Jewish people throughout their dispersion when they were living in Europe after the the dispersion of the Jewish people under the Roman conquest in AD 70, right? So pogroms were very regular. So a lot of Jewish people moved to the area of the Russian Empire. That's where they were, the most, but they suffered pogroms a lot. So during the Nazi period, when they were transporting, Jewish people, I actually just finished watching a movie today. Ben Kingsley acted in it. It's about, what's it called? Is it the final something? I've forgotten what it's called. But it had Ben Kingsley, and he was acting as the the Nazi mass murderer Adolf Eichmann. So it shows how. So it's sort of like a modern equivalent of the Street on Garibaldi, but how the Mossad, right? Mossad agents went to kidnap. They abducted the Nazi who was living under a false identity in Argentina, Adolf Eichmann. So that's kind of like interesting. But anyway, I was watching that. So you see, during that time, this Adolf Eichmann, for instance, he was responsible for transporting millions of Jews, right? So they moved them from different sites in Europe because that was something the Nazis were doing. They called it the final solution. So they wanted to exterminate all Jewish people, kill all of them. So they'd gather them from all places of Europe. And there were places that were cooperating with the Nazis because there was a lot of hatred of Jewish people in Europe, right? A lot of persecution. Different places that they'd lived in Europe, they'd suffered persecution. There were all sorts of laws against them. So many, especially many European countries that were conquered by the Nazis at that time, and then many cooperated with them. Now there are people who protected Jewish people, right? So at the time, Iran under Reza Shah, and then the other Shah, his son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, they protected Jewish people, right? Polish Jews fled into Iran because Iran was neutral, right? Iran was neutral. I've done a video explaining what happened to Iran, how the Russian and the British jointly invaded Iran, right? And sort of kicked them out of the war, preventing them from helping Nazi Germany, even though they were supposed to be neutral anyway. But because Reza Shah and Adolf Hitler were friends, they were good friends, but I've done a video explaining that, so you can look at that video. But in any event, Iran protected Polish Jews and allowed Polish Jews to flee into Iran, and they escaped being deported into the concentration camps for extermination. Additionally, Iranian diplomats in Europe protected Jewish people, Iranian Jews, including a guy called Abdul Hussein Sardari, right? He famously protected Iranian Jews, protected Jews and prevented them from being deported into concentration camps. It's interesting that, even to this day, there's still Iranian Jews who live in Iran today. Of course, there were more. Their population was up to 100,000 in 1979, prior to the Islamic Revolution. They chose to continue to live in Iran because they were protected and not persecuted there. Even though Israel now had a state, the Jewish people now had a state of their own in 1948 in the Middle East. Jewish people continued to live in Iran, where they had their own autonomy, they had their own schools, Jewish schools, and many still live there to this day, despite the war between US-Israeli forces against Iranians. Roughly, their numbers have dwindled since 1979. There were about 100,000 in 1979, but today they're said to maybe just be as, you know, by high estimates, 20,000, right? But they're protected. They still have their communities, their Jewish communities. They have their schools, and they have their synagogues, and they're protected. In fact, I saw a video and showing Iranian Jews still living in Iran today. So these were times, in which, historically, Persians, Iranians have protected Jewish people, right, and allowed them to flourish in their culture. Academically, they let them flourish. They helped them to flourish during the Sassanian Empire. In Europe, Jews were actually banned um, during the Middle Ages. One wonders, you see today, most people know about how, Jews flourish academically, right? In the arts and so many things, right? For instance, Albert Einstein. People don't know Albert Einstein. He was a German Jew, and, the guy who helped Oppenheimer, an American Jew who helped develop the atomic bomb, led the Manhattan Project. There's so many other Jewish people in the arts, of course. Famously, the Warner Brothers Hollywood. Hollywood was actually started by Jewish people. And this is not anti-Semitic, it's just history, the history of Hollywood. Jewish people started Hollywood. And so you see Jewish people flourish in the arts, in the sciences, and so many things. That's common today. But you wonder, during the Middle Ages, during the era of the Renaissance, why don't we hear about any Jewish person, right? Any Jewish person flourishing? What happened? When we hear of the Leonardo da Vinci's, Michelangelo's, all those geniuses, including scientists, that arose during the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, right? Where were the Jewish people? Scholars, writers, Shakespeare, all of these people, where were the Jewish people? They were living in Europe then. Why didn't they produce any great works? That's because Europeans actually banned Jewish people from attending their universities and their institutions, and they were ostracized from associating with Europeans. Europeans who were caught giving shelter to Jewish people or interacting with them were fined. They could be sentenced. They could be named. There were various penalties against them. But during this period, they received protection under Persian empires in the Middle East, and actually under Muslims as well, right? It flourished between the 7th and 11th centuries in Persia as well, right? They still had that protection, and they were flourishing in their centers and creating the Babylonian Talmud, right? But under the Caliphate, so that between that 7th and 11th century, that was under the Caliphates, right? The Arabian Caliphates that had now conquered the Persians. So the Persians were sort of were under Arabian rule and part of the Islamic Empire. Now remember, just because of their laws, the Quran and the words of the Prophet, Jews were not to be harmed by Muslims. They were called people of the book and given a special status, right? And so they were protected. And it was under this period that many Jewish scholars flourished, and they flourished in business as well. There's a guy called Maimonides, I think he was a 12th century physician and businessman. He flourished in the courts of the Egyptian, I think it was under Saladin, right? In the courts of Saladin. If you've watched the movie The Kingdom, in which Orlando Bloom is in, so you see Saladin, who was a famous Muslim vizier, like vizier is a governor, and Maimonides was a Jewish physician and businessman and scholar, right? A genius, a polymath. He flourished in the courts of Saladin. My name is Osha, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.